Hey there, everybody. I'm excited to see people starting to pop in. Today we're going to be talking all about elderflower, my favorite, possibly my favorite flower ever. And I just want to welcome you in. I'm here in California and it is a gorgeous day out there. It really feels like spring, although we could definitely use a little bit more rain because we haven't had it in a while. But just wanted to say welcome wherever you are, if you are deep in snow or here on the Central Coast with sunshine. I'm really happy that you are joining me today. This is going to be a workshop building on what we did with workshops last year that were really in depth about growing elderberries on the West Coast. And this one, as you know, is going to be all about elderflowers as a commercial crop. So without further ado, I think we're just going to jump right in. The goal is to give a nice broad overview on growing elderflowers as a commercial crop. We could probably spend an entire day just talking about elderflowers, but this will give you some of the basics, and I hope that we will, fill in some gaps for you, make you think about other things you want to learn about, and let's continue the conversation afterward as we dive into deeper stuff about elderflowers. So just a few housekeeping things. You'll see I'm signed in twice here. I'm a panelist with myself, and that is because last year during one of our workshops, my computer blew up right in the middle. And so I've learned that I need to have a backup. So that's my backup up there. If during the presentation you guys have questions, which I really hope you will have, please put them into the chat box. What I'm going to do is just go through all of my slides at once. I know you'll have questions along the way. Please write them down in the chat box, and then we're going to have question and answer at the end, all in one chunk. And so, don't think you'll remember your question later. Go ahead and put it in the chat box, and we will go through them at the end. Okay, so let's get going. Let me share my screen. And open this up. All right. So, welcome. This is another lunchtime workshop for West Coast Elderberry Growers Group. And, oh my gosh, let me see so that I can see. There we go. We're going to be doing today all about elderflowers. So we're going to keep it to about an hour long, and we can always follow up with questions afterward. What are we going to cover today? We're going to be covering growing elderflowers as a commercial crop here in the U.S., focused a lot on West Coast because that's where I am, but a lot of this applies to no matter where you are in terms of marketing and post-harvest work. So we're going to talk about pruning and care, harvest, post-harvest, drying, and destemming markets, and some research on best practices. My name is Katie Renneker. My company is Carmel Berry Company. I'm here in Carmel Valley in the Central Coast of California. And I make products with elderflowers and elderberries. And, one of our biggest goals is to support farmers as best we can, because we're 100% committed to never using any imported berries or flowers when they are a beautiful plant that grows right here. So, so that's me. I am also part of a loose group of growers out here in the West Coast called the West Coast Elderberry Growers Group. And we have growers down here in California and all the way up through Oregon, Washington, and up into British Columbia. And the idea is that we can work together to share information, education, in-person events at some point, hopefully relatively soon, and really just have it be a collaborative space for growers, because it's kind of the Wild West here with elderberries as a commercial crop. It's different here than in the Midwest where it's been grown before commercially. So our goal is to make sure that we can support each other. Now, as I mentioned, we did a series of workshops last year. It's about 7 hours total, split up into 3 sections, super in depth on growing Nigra, canadensis, and cerulean elderberries, and that covers everything with selection and site prep and pruning, harvesting. So start there, or go back to that if you haven't watched those yet, because what I'm talking about today is going to be building on that general foundation. If you want the links to those recordings, please email me, katie@carmelberry.com, and I'll send them to you with the handouts, because we had handouts for every one of those as well. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. As you hopefully know, if you are joining us about elderflowers, you know that elderflowers and elderberries have a very long and incredible history. They're native to almost every continent on Earth, and they have always been part of the traditional culture on every continent on Earth, and that continues to this day. So not just in Europe, but all over. And here in California, where I'm from, it's a very strong part of the indigenous cultural history and work today. So this is a picture of the Amamutsan, which is a group of indigenous communities here. Then they're working a lot with traditional medicinal plants, and that includes elderberry. And one of the Esalen tribe members described elderberry to me as being a part of their family. It is a family member. They have that much respect and reverence for it. So I try to bring that into all the work that I do on research and sharing with other growers interested in growing, that I respectfully ask you to do what you can to support indigenous groups in your area as they continue to work with or reintroduce medicinal plants such as elderberry and elderflower. We did a lot more in that in depth with our other workshops too. Okay, so there is a long and wonderful history of the elderflower, not just the elderberry, for medicinal uses. And this is everything from eye infections to skin infections to the more well-known viral and respiratory health. Unfortunately, the FDA actually has quite a few requirements about what I, as a business owner, can and cannot say about elderberry and elderflower's medicinal properties, because I sell products made out of those, and so I need to make sure that I don't cross that line of, saying that my products can treat any disease or illness. So at some point I want to do an entire workshop just on the medicinal and cultural history and traditions with elderflower and elderberry, and have people on it that are more free to talk about the studies that have been done and everything like that. But we have on our website, we do have a Learn page that links to other lists of studies that have been done on the medical benefits of elderberry and elderflower. But for any of you producers out there, you really need to know your compliance and regulations about what you can and cannot say about the health benefits of elderberries. You don't want to get a letter from the FDA. So thankfully, though, there's so much more information out there in the world from herbalists, and it's just a much more widely known plant now with its benefits and the studies. So, it's just, there's a lot more general knowledge about the benefits now. So that is great. That was not true even 5 years ago. So today we're going to be talking about 3 different elderflower subspecies, but mostly only about 2 of them. The first one is elderberry from Europe, or elderflower from Europe. It's Sambucus nigra, and it traditionally is grown in orchards, as you can see, that are, like small orchard trees for the flowers with trunks being supported, etc. The benefit is that it's been around the longest in terms of a commercial crop. So a lot has been research has been done on best practices for that. The downside of that is that it doesn't do well in most parts of the U.S. So, a lot of the research that's been done doesn't apply to where most of us live. Northern climates up into Canada is where Sambucus nigra does the best. And I actually know some people down in Florida that have given it a go too. The next one is the American elderflower. This is Sambucus canadensis. This is native to east of the Rockies all the way to the East Coast. This is the one that, Midwest elderberry growers and have been growing for a while. There's cultivars that have been released and studied by universities. Vermont and University of Missouri is doing a lot of work with it, and some others. And so this is the one that's most well known in terms of cultivars. It's really the easiest in terms of harvesting because they stay low. They only get to about 7 feet tall. And that makes harvest go much faster. The challenge is that actually Sambucus canadensis, the aroma and the flavor is not as strong as either the Niagara or the Cerulean. And in my palate, I don't enjoy it as much as the others. However, the studies show that the health benefits of the elderflower are still there in the canadensis, so it's most definitely a valuable crop. Sambucus cerulean is native to the West Coast. It's also called the blue elderberry, in this case, the blue elderflower, even though it's a yellow flower. The benefits of growing it out here in the West is that it is a native plant, so it already thrives in our very dry ecosystem, low water needs, low input needs. And I love the flavor and the aroma of it. I know that more work needs to be done in the studying of the phytonutrients and compounds that are in it, as well as the others. But I adore the flavor of the elderflower from the blues. And it can be part of a native hedgerow. And I know a lot of people chiming in today are people who want to grow elderflower as part of a native hedgerow, not necessarily as a full orchard. The challenge is that it's not well studied. You know, we're still in the Wild West out here in terms of knowing what you know. There's no cultivars that have been released. There's a lot of citizen scientists with growers sharing knowledge, but that's we're still at the very beginning of understanding how to select for good traits and stuff like that. But another downside of it is that it can grow to be a huge tree, a 25-foot tree, and that can be very time consuming if you hope to harvest as a commercial crop, you know, as a cash crop, because it can take a lot of size. But the good news is that the flowers, even though the berry quality can be all over the place because it is a wild plant here, the flowers tend to be across the board excellent. So in our other workshop, we talk a lot about cautioning people about blue elderberries can have this green goo inside, never getting the purple juice. And that happens quite frequently in the wild elderflowers that people could be wild crop harvesting from. However, the flowers seem to be doing great, totally acceptable and usable, even if the berries produced are not preferable. So that's really good news. Okay, elderflowers as a commercial crop, the benefits. If you are growing as an orchard, such as with the American elderberry, the canadensis, you could experience a couple years of spotted winged Drosophila or the other pests really wiping out your berry crop. So I know some farmers that have taken a break from berries and only harvested the flowers because they know that they can still get money. It's not a lost crop. They're just beating the bugs to it, as it were. Out here in the West, we luckily at this point don't seem to have as much of an issue with spotted winged Drosophila. But it is nice that you can harvest both flowers and berries from your same orchard. And University of Missouri shows that it actually does not reduce your overall harvest yields when you harvest up to a third of the elderflowers from your crop. And again, this is for canadensis that's grown in the orchards. So there is a huge, strong market for elderflowers. More than 95% of the flowers that are used in the U.S. Are imported. Frontier Co-op is just one of many major, importers of herbs, and they import more than 80,000 pounds of berries and flowers, and that's probably more because that statistic is a couple years old at this point. But Mountain Rose Herbs and Star West Botanicals, they are importing from Croatia and Bulgaria and Bosnia and Poland, and yet it's a native plant here. So there is huge potential for elderflowers here. And another thing is if you are installing elderflower as part of a hedgerow, you can get a little bit of an income from your hedgerow, which generally you're sowing hedgerow for pollinator habitat, bees and butterflies. But this way, you are also able to earn some money off of that hedgerow. And the benefit is you can diversify with a niche crop. There is a high demand for elderflowers and elderberries right now, and it's that could be nice to have a niche crop. The challenges: fresh elderflowers are super time sensitive, so you're either needing to deliver them directly to your customer, within hours or day of harvest, or you are going down the path of drying and destemming and selling dried elderflowers. And the challenge of that is that drying and destemming take a lot of time and space and labor. If you're harvesting off of trees with the cerulean, it could be a benefit that you can visit the same tree multiple times, like every week, to harvest again. But that can also mean that you're labor-wise, you're passing down the same row multiple times, and that labor can add up. Canadensis, most of those cultivars really have a much narrower harvesting window when all the flowers will be ripe at the same time, so that's not as much of a concern. But the main challenge for elderflowers as a commercial crop are the lack of mechanical methods for destemming. It equals a lot of labor and adds to the cost. So as we figure out mechanization, that is going to really transform the elderflowers as a crop. Okay, what do people do with these elderflowers? Oh, so much. So salves, soaps, lots of body and skin care, tinctures for medicinal uses, teas, infused oils, honey. I mean, a lot of the traditional uses of having it to be either as an immune support or as a salve for skin irritants and healing, that just opens up so many doors. Wine and mead makers, brewers. We make, this is a picture of my products on the right, the elderflower syrup, elderflower pull-out preserves, and an elderflower tea. Those are the things that we make. So, in terms of comparing elderflower versus elderberry, in terms of an actual cash crop, the elderflower, you actually, if you're making your own value-added products, you don't need as many as the berries, and so per pound, a little goes a long way. So your return on investment is higher. Okay, step by step planting and selection, then pruning, harvest, drying, and destemming. We're just going to go down this list. So with the plant selection, you're really going to be making a decision. Are you going to be going with Canadensis and plant as an orchard? Are you going to be going down the hedgerow route and planting it as part of a hedgerow? If you are looking for taking cuttings of the cerulean, and we go into this a lot in the other workshops because cerulean itself especially can be very challenging for propagation. But really there seems to be possibly like a male and a female tree of cerulean. And one of them has really skinny leaves and small clusters of elderflowers, small cymes. And some have these really wide leaves with fuzzy stems, and they make the huge dinner plate size clusters. So, follow the trees. If you are following wild ones, follow them for a year, see what their clusters are like. And look at those traits: aroma, size, ease of harvest, those kinds of things. But in general, the quality of the flowers tends to be good, but you might get more per cluster with some trees rather than others. Again, we go into selection and propagation a lot more in the other workshops. Okay, this is actually just to give a quick showing of what planting elderflower in a hedgerow can be like. This is a native hedgerow on a farm in the Central Valley, and you can see the elderflowers in there. They had the most success with this hedgerow. Out of the 3 farms, this is the one that did the best, and they had 10-foot spacing. They did a deep rip underneath them before planting, 3 feet down, and then they did weekly irrigation. and they removed the protective tubes earlier than the other farms, and these were thriving. I mean, some of these trees were getting like 100 pounds of berries per tree, in their second year. So they did not do the study with the elderflowers on these, but this is just an example of what planting in a hedgerow can look like. Now, benefits of hedgerows, and this is again, West Coast native hedgerows. There are funds from that you can use, because this is conservation, this is protection of habitat for pollinators. It might be with erosion control. So there is funding that you can get for your farm to help pay for installation of these hedgerows. Okay, again, I talked about sometimes the dinner plate size signs are this big, and sometimes it's a smallish, roundish sign about this big. And we've discovered that a lot of that actually has to do with the pruning that is done. So on the left, this is over here is I'm just going to talk briefly about pruning American elders, because those you really cut all the way down to the ground, like mow it, or trim it all the way down to the ground, and fresh sprouts come up that year with the flowers on it. Super easy, straightforward, flowers on that same year of growth. Now, the blue elders on this side, we have discovered that we get the biggest signs, the biggest clusters on the trees. They got the most harsh haircuts. So this one on the left, you can see it was basically stripped. And within the next year, this same year, it was fully leafed out, 6 foot long new branches with huge clusters. And again, this is one of the ones that tend to have the broad leaves and fuzzy stems, and really flat clusters. So it came back, and we got flowers off of it that year. It was about a month later. Instead of May, it was more like June, July that we were getting those flowers, but they were gorgeous. So it loved that really severe pruning. Another method that we've done as a picture on the right, this is another one that we actually left the top alone and just trimmed all the way down to the bottom, all the way down, and fresh growth came up that year. Much easier to harvest. We didn't need to use the ladders. We just left the top 2/3 of the tree for the birds, and we only harvest from the bottom. We've been doing this with quite a few of the trees for the last 5 years, and it seems to work really well. Again, we down here get flowers off of that first year growth. Up in Oregon, they've noticed that it's the second year where they are getting flowers when it's been chopped all the way down to the ground. So one thing I really want you to take heed of, though, is if you are in the native, if you're doing native blue elderberries, if you are in the area for the valley elderberry longhorn beetle, which is basically the Central Valley, parts of the Central Valley here in California, you cannot do what we did with this tree right here and strip it, because the elderberry beetle is endangered, and its habitat allows for some pruning, but not massive like that. You are allowed to prune some. So more on where you can learn about that from UC Davis or UC Syrup at the end of the presentation. But don't be afraid to give them that haircut. They thrive under it. Okay, ease of harvest. I've talked about this a little bit now. On the left are the blue elders, and you can see that's a 10-foot ladder. So these are, 20, 25-foot tall trees. It can mean that you can get a lot of blossoms, but boy, you're going to be climbing up and down that ladder, and it just takes so much time. We've discovered that we can pick about, oh my gosh, I have it down later in the presentation, but I think it's about 5 to 7 pounds an hour. In Europe, where they're growing in those orchards and it's totally uniform, I have heard that they can pick up to 60 pounds an hour. So here on the right is our field of American elderberries. This is Bob Gordon and Ranch, and it just went so much faster harvesting. along these rows where everything is short and you're not dealing with any ladders. So your labor time is going to be a lot less. And again, the University of Missouri study showed that if on the Canadensis ones, the ones on the right here, you can harvest, see all these low down flowers. Once they have berries on it, they're going to be dragging on the ground and you won't be able to harvest them anyway, for food safety reasons. So if you pick the flowers, then you're getting flowers, but you're also still protecting a lot of your elderberry crops. So you can do both. Incidentally, this is where we had a farm, and we've lost that land because the land was sold by the landlord, which is why we ended up starting to do these workshops, because instead of starting all the way fresh with starting over with land, I just decided to put my energy towards sharing education info with other people. So that's just the side of how we started to get this going. Okay, let's talk about the next step. We've talked about, site selection. We've talked about selection of the type of elderflower you're going to grow. We've talked about how it helps to prune it and for harvest. And now we're going to talk about what you do with the flowers after you harvest. So post-harvest, you can sell the elderflowers fresh and get a good amount of money for them. Restaurants, bars, ice cream shops, soap and salve makers, kombucha. We've sold to all of those markets before. Some of them like loose head packings in the cardboard boxes like you're seeing down here. That's really fast because you're just snipping them, put them in a box, and you keep them in a cooler, in your fridge until you're delivering, and then they stick it in their cooler until they're ready to use them, if they're brewing beer or something. Super fast way of selling them, easy to transport. However, time and distance is really definitely a factor because they don't stay fresh if they're just loose in a box, out in the warmth. So you have to be much more cognizant about transportation and stuff like that. Then we have restaurants that have preferred to have the elderflowers on long stems like a bouquet with the stems in water. They found that makes them last a lot longer in their cooler, and they're using them for garnishes, for cocktails, for desserts and stuff like that, where they only need a little bit of it at a time and want to have it last for a week. So we've charged a premium for that because it takes a lot longer to cut stems long enough, make a bunch, get it into water, transport it that way. So average prices for fresh wholesale, this was 2020 because that's when we stopped doing our restaurant service, was, five. I've seen $5. We never charge $5 because our transportation to the restaurants, the breweries, was higher than that. But $5 to $15 ish for fresh flowers in the boxes, and $25 per pound for the long stemmed. And these are two, Michelin starred James Beard restaurants where they're okay with that price point. Breweries and wineries are going to be more looking at just the box of the fresh heads. So if you have a way of getting those markets, it's a great way to pass on, get money from this crop immediately and not have to deal with the drying and destemming, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Okay, so if you are going to be selling dried flowers, and this is actually the main way that elderflowers are used in the US. People order them and make them from Amazon or Mountain Rose Herbs, and they're putting them into syrups or their soaps or a tincture or a tea, and they are dried, destemmed elderflowers. So that's really what, if you want this to be, a crop that is the most easy to sell, that is where you want to be headed in your operation. You can dry them just on racks, air dry, like this picture on the left. But the problem with that is that it takes it can take, depending on your humidity level, it can take a couple weeks for them to get dry enough just in the air. And that means longer time for the phytonutrients to degrade, for mold or humidity to be an issue, pests getting in your shed, you need to have that, make sure that that is up to food safety standards. So it's slow, but it's cheap, it's totally free, but it really has to depend on how dry your climate is where you're doing that. Another option is to put it on drying racks like this one, put it in a room with a dehumidifier. And here's a dehumidifier down here, just commercial, or, just home use one. You'll see a commercial dehumidifier in just a minute. So this is a good, you've got one row of elderberries, you've got 10 trees on your property, and you can move through them each week, in a small setup like this. There's also small units that are, kind of home units for dehydrators. With dehydrators, you have to be really careful about the heat applied, because that can be a problem for maintaining all those good value, the phytonutrients that are in the elderflower. So it's been recommended to me to put if you use a dehydrator, it has to be on the absolute lowest setting, 90 degrees. Like if the dehydrator only goes down to 125, that is not the one for elderflowers. So a much safer way would be to use a dehumidifier instead. And don't forget freeze drying. Freeze drying seems to be the way that all those nutrients are preserved the best. But freeze drying units are super tiny if they're affordable. And otherwise, you're looking at a really big cost for a big piece of machinery. But the quality is going to be, excellent with freeze drying. It's just money. So let's look at this. This is on the left here is a commercial dehydrator that the Midwest Elderberry Co-op came into possession of, and they're working to get that going as a co-op hub for lots of growers to be able to share the equipment together. Again, lowest setting, but wow, you can fit a whole bunch in there at once. So that is a really efficient way of drying it. Then I'm going to show you this video. This is from a farm in the Czech Republic, and they've set up a drying shed. And if you look on Pinterest or Google it, there are so many versions of DIY sheds for drying herbs. It's incredible. So you can go down a whole rabbit hole of looking at designs for that. This is an example of what this farm in the Czech Republic has done. Ooh, sorry, that noise. Let me bring that down. So they have 3 dehumidifier units in this shed, and they're able to pack the elderflowers in, a really high level. It's not single level flowers. They're able to have, it thicker than that. And they estimate that they dried about 400 pounds of elderflowers last season with this method. And it only takes a couple days, and then they move that out and move the next in. So it's pretty impressive operation how much they can pass through that. And it's literally a shed, plywood in there with food grade mesh for the flowers to be touching, with the dehumidifiers in there to keep it going, keep it drying out without a lot of heat. What I want to say about this. Oh, so this is our first setup that we had for drying elderflowers, and this is just row cover material that to keep birds out. You roll it down the row, and we stapled it to these frames and put this in a room with a dehumidifier in it. This size of rack has about 54 square foot of space, and we only do one level of flowers, pretty spread out, and that holds about 8 pounds of fresh. We also have done it on a baker's speed rack, with the cookie sheets in there. And it's great if you have a small space, but you can really only fit 3 pounds at the most of fresh flowers on that. So, that is like less than 1 tree's worth, or it's about 1 tree's worth for us. So, it's not a lot of space, but if you have 1 tree, then you could use that as a very small setup. All right. Destemming the flowers. After after they are dried. Now, the Czech Republic farm sells them on the stem to their consumers, but they're mostly doing direct to consumers rather than wholesale flowers to salve or syrup makers or wineries. And so that's going to be, you're going to need one more step here for destemming the flowers after they have dried. So there is just no fast way of doing this. Generally it's rubbing together the cymes after they're dry. If you wait until the stems are super dry, then they are brittle and they fall off. So for us, ours flowers are on the rack with the dehumidifier in the room for about 2 to 3 days. And then at that point, the flowers are dry, the stems are still a little bit pliable, so they don't just snap and become brittle. And when we rub them together between our hands, they fall off the stems easily, but the stem does not disintegrate and get in the mix. It's slow work. It takes about an hour to get a pound, which is like a Ziploc gallon bag full of dried elderflowers. You can also, some people rub it over a cookie cooling rack. That's in the picture. Other people cut with scissors just right behind the flowers. I found that is super tedious and just doesn't work as well. For us out here, about 7 to 10 pounds of fresh on the stem elderflowers ends up equaling 1 pound of dried destemmed. So 7 pounds of fresh to about a gallon size Ziploc bag of dried flowers. Of course, that is going to be different depending on if you're picking huge cymes with massive thick stems, or if you're picking tiny cymes, so you have just lots of stem and not very many flowers. So there's going to be a variety. Dried destemmed flowers, the wholesale price is about $40 to $45. Now, if you're on Amazon or Frontier, they're going to be like $35 a pound, and those are coming from Croatia or Bulgaria. So there's really not a lot of sellers of elderflowers from here in the US. People will expect to pay a premium to have it be from here, especially certified organic. I expect to do that. And so 40 to 45 seems to be that amount right now, but I expect that could increase because there aren't very many growers of it out here. Direct to consumer price, when I'm checking websites of some growers that I know sell, their dried elderflowers in small bags by the ounce to customers to make teas, etc. Their price is anywhere from $50 to $70 per pound, but they're selling it in 2 or 4 ounce bags. So really what needs to happen in the elderflower world as a commercial crop is that we have to come up with ways to mechanize the destemming of the elderflowers, possibly even improve the drying methods of it, but it's really that destemming step that is hard. So there's a lot of discussion about why don't we destem them first and then dry them that way, and I do know people who do that. This is Terry's elderberry destemmer. It's a shaker style table, and he's had great success destemming the elderflowers when they're fresh, straight from the field, rubbing them over that screen just like he does with the berries, and the flowers fall right off and they collect them. He is selling them frozen, the fresh flowers frozen. So right after they come out, they're going directly into the freezer. I think wineries really love that. Breweries might love it. And he uses it for River Hills Harvest, their elderflower cordial. It is fast and beautiful. For me, when I tried it, we've tried it a couple times, either with the shaker table or with our modified grape destemmer. The grape destemmer was a total disaster. They came out like in this mush. But I also felt like with the shaker table, rubbing it over a screen damages the flowers. It bruised them. They started oxidizing. And so I think this method is very useful for some applications of it, but I just didn't like the flavor and the aroma or how it looked. The flowers were quite brown after they had been destemmed that way for me. and then drying. So we went back to hand de-stemming, rubbing them together between our hands after they were dried instead of trying to do it beforehand. But keep on innovating, everybody, because we've got to get there, and that's the most important step. Okay. Another, thing that needs to be improved upon is our drying sheds. There's great designs online for de-stemming sheds or dehydrating sheds. And I've actually heard of some farmers trying to use air being blown with fans to help de-stem the elderflowers, kind of like tossing them after they're dried on the stem, tossing them around to loosen them from the stems that way. So that way they're already dried, they're not going to be bruised. But so the tests are still in process for that. If anybody tries that on their own, please let me know how it goes, because this is a project that we're all going to have to solve together to move forward. Okay, good manufacturing processes and storage. This is a dried crop. There are specific parameters for, if you're selling this wholesale, your customers are going to be asking for particular things about how you are treating it. It needs to make sure it has lot codes on it. So you know exactly, which field it came from, what day it was picked, when it was dried, so that there is traceability. If I buy your flowers and something goes wrong with my product, I need to know which harvest traces all the way back to the farm. So having a good paper trail is very important. I'm not going to go into that because food safety, paperwork is a whole other topic that we can do another time. But this is just, I'm talking about small producer stuff here. I don't actually remember the moisture content for elderflowers, and I should know it to be able to tell you this, but I don't. I apologize. We live in such a dry climate that this has just never been an issue at all. We have no humidity. But if I were in a climate that had humidity, you absolutely need to make sure you know this, because you don't want to box them up into these food safety Ziploc bags and then have it go moldy, right? No. So make sure you find that out if you're going to be selling it this way. Make sure you're storing in food grade plastic, airtight. This is an important one. A lot of people think that if you're going to be drying flowers or herbs, put them in the sun, put them in your car with the sun baking down, making your car super hot, and they dry instantly. Well, they do, but they lose a lot of the benefits that way. So best practices for drying elderflowers and other herbs and spices is really out of direct sunlight at a low heat rather than really cooking them over 100 degrees. So that's why these shed designs, rather than like a solar cooker or a greenhouse, I think is probably generally preferred. Okay, let's do a little bit more with numbers and further questions about this. So dried de-stemmed elderflowers sell from about $14 to $56 per pound. And at 14 is so low when you think about that. But that includes, sources of overseas that I've been able to find. That is as low as people could buy it. 56 is for certified organic, grown here in the U.S. Is that number. Fresh elderflowers sell anywhere from $3 for those clipped off heads in a box to about $30. And of course, certified organic does add value to that. And it depends on if you're selling them on the stem or in just a box of clusters. Between 7 and 10 pounds of fresh flowers on the stem equals 1 pound of dried de-stemmed. I just try and keep that in my mind because that helps me figure out what I need to charge for the flowers and what you will need to keep in mind when you charge for your flowers. Most of it is labor. So if 7 pounds of fresh equals $35 to $70 per pound, then I need to know that 1 pound of dry should equal about $35 to $70 also. But and the average right now is about $35 from major imported outlets. But I've calculated that my labor just for harvest and post harvest is about $30 a pound if I'm paying $15 living wage. And so that right there would be $30 per pound. That doesn't include the overhead for the care, for pruning, for feeding, for, packaging, for all that other overhead that goes with the business. So, you're going to need to keep track of that for yourself. Again, this is not really widely done in the US. There's nobody you can just turn to and say, how are you doing this? It's all new. So if you go into the elderflower world and elderberry world, know that you're still one of the, citizen scientists helping us figure out all these things. We're in it together. So how do we increase profit from elderflowers without having to charge, $80, $90 a pound? Because nobody will charge that. Nobody will buy that. It would make, my products as a value-added maker unaffordable for any of my customers. So then I wouldn't be able to buy it from you. So how do we bring elderflower production prices down so that it can be a good, viable, and good crop for farmers? Harvesting orchards rather than wild trees is one benefit. If you are planting in hedgerows, keeping those trees down to a reasonable height, 8 feet tall, will be very important to eliminate the need for ladders, because that just takes up so much time. And then mechanizing the descending, we've already talked about that, or selling fresh frozen, or fresh or frozen rather than the dried destemmed. Okay. This is just a really brief reminder that if you are thinking about hedgerows with the native blue elderberries, there are some really great resources out there. University of California has their UC Syrup is the organization that does great research, and they have built a website all about elderberries and have a whole section on growing them in hedgerows, have information about the studies they did on best practices for growing in hedgerows that we go into a lot more detail in the other workshops. But I'm just throwing this website up here again so that you can see it and remember it, and go find more information if you are indeed going the hedgerow route. This is their website for elderberries, and it has all kinds of information about marketing, research that they've done about who will be buying these elderflowers. If it's not Carmel Berry Company or some other company like me, if you're growing it, or if you're doing value added yourself. And so it's just a really fabulous resource. More resources for elderberries and elderflowers in general that are pertinent to not just West Coast with Cerulean, but all elderberries and elderflowers in general. I'm really excited that the Midwest Elderberry Conference is back in person this June, which is going to be wonderful. It's field tours and just 2 days of packed information and sharing information and knowledge with growers from all over the U.S. and all over the world. So I'm really excited to do that. So you can go to River Hills Harvest and find out more information and to register. And the other thing is that, and I'm putting up this is River Hills Harvest has made an online workshop. Terry has been sharing for free information on growing elderberries for like decades now, and he's finally made a course that people can purchase and do it. I have no monetary interest in this. I just think it's a really good resource. Terry is a wealth of knowledge about growing elderberries and elderflowers. So I'm putting this up here because if you really are thinking about growing elderflowers and elderberries, in addition to our free workshops, this is an investment into this course that I think will be well worth your time. So, and then staying in touch. Again, like I've said many times, this is a new thing in the United States, particularly West Coast, particularly with elderflowers. Yes, elderflowers have been used for thousands of years, but that is very different than having a farmer try and have it be a viable crop and grow it to help keep their farm alive and thriving. And so we need to do this together. And so West Coast Elderberry Growers has a Facebook group. Again, it's only for commercial growers, so you can ask to join that. And it's a wonderful way of sharing and asking questions and information. There's Elderberry Growers Connect and New Elderberry Growers. Those are both two Facebook groups that are also specifically for commercial growers of elderberries, not buying and selling, or hobby growers. This is more like, I have some questions about the financials. I have some questions about, inputs, or what is this pest, those kinds of things. So those are super valuable resources with some, don't forget about those. And then here at Carmel Berry Company, we are going to be opening up our applications for this year's Elderberry Growers Grants. And so this is just some pictures of what some of our grant recipients last year did. Field prep, getting starts of some new cultivars, mulch, irrigation, all that. So I'm really excited that we're going to be doing those grants. Not only did we give money to some companies that were getting going with elderberries, but we also partnered them with mentor farmers to be able to ask questions. We had invited guest growers, experienced growers, to meet with them on a regular basis so that they could find out from more experienced growers and ask all the questions they need. So I really love being able to do that. It's really important to me with Carmel Berry Company. So stay tuned about that coming up. And then we've got one last thing. We were supposed to have the organic certification workshop tomorrow, but life happens. We needed to push it back. So it's going to be on the 16th of February. So it's not too late to register for that one. And we will look forward to seeing you in that one. So I'm going to open up the chat box just right now so we make sure that I get everybody's questions answered. So, great. I love seeing where everybody's from. So thank you. I should have actually had you guys put that in the chat. So if you want to add that now, just say who you are, where you're coming from. That would be awesome. I love seeing that. And a lot of people will be watching this later. So, if you want to pop in and say who you are and where you're from, that would be really great. So what destemmer are we using? So for our elderberries, we have a grape destemmer. It's the maker is Enotalia. And we modified it so that it would work with elderberries. And that meant changing the holes from the size of grapes down to the size of elderflowers. It meant removing one of the wheels so that it would not crush the elderberries like it does for grapes. And what else? I feel like there's one other thing we did for that and I can't. Oh, and slowing down the motor so it's not as fast. It needs a little bit more gentle. So, we go into great detail with that in the other workshops. If you want to ask me that specific question, send me an email and I will send you some more about the specs of what we changed for that. And we didn't invent that. There's a lot of elderberry growers that have been doing modifications like this for more than a decade. And we learned, elderberry conference, you connect with lots of growers and we learned some best practices with that. Is there any data on an optimal percentage of flowers to remove in order to bolster fruit production? It's actually the opposite. You cannot harm your fruit production by taking flowers away. So that's a really good question. Cutting flowers does not actually push the plant to make more berries, but it also doesn't hurt berry production by removing the flowers. I mean, especially true for the for the cerulean. We visit the same trees probably 6 times once a week for 6 weeks, and then they're pretty much done. So they just keep on, they're indeterminate. They just keep on making elderflowers that then turn into berries. I've seen flowers on there in November, and they're never going to ripen into berries, but there's still some flowers on there. Did you mention how to measure the moisture of the flowers and the ideal moisture percent for packaging? That was when I said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I don't have that statistic. So I apologize. I will actually find that out and follow up if you want to send me an email about that. There are moisture meters and there are parameters for measuring the moisture content in dried herbs. And Ours just get used so fast, they basically go right from the dryer into products. So I'm not storing it for a really long time. So I just haven't, I'm sorry, I should have had that before, but I will follow up on that. Because that is really important if you are selling to customers and it's going to be stored for a while. I have a mixed crop of elderberries, some European, some American, and so forth. Is there any issue trying to sell the mixed flowers? I think that's a great question, and I think that actually probably depends on your customer that's buying them. We use different varietals for different products. I am super particular about using the Cerulean elderflower, the blue elderflowers, in our elderflower syrup because it has the aroma, the flavor of that is really important to me to keep that profile. However, our tea, we are using a mix of both the American elderflower and the Cerulean, and I don't actually, it's mixed with other herbs. It's a blend, and it's lovely either way. I don't think anybody except me would probably notice a difference. So I think that would have to ask your customer for that. I have a question. Is it too early to prune down my elderberry now? We are in zone 9B. Our last frost date is around March 25th. As long as it is still dormant and not already leafing out, it's totally fine. If it is starting to leaf out, honestly, elderberry is super resilient. If it's already growing, it would be fine to prune it at this point. That's just not a problem. I've seen, it get chopped back in May, and then in August, it's fully leafing out again and trying. So the only issue would be that if you do it too late, you might not get a crop of flowers this year. It would be the next year. And frost doesn't really matter. Frost doesn't matter. Elderberries are super resilient. They're pruning them up in BC right now in like a foot of snow. And they're pruning that. And then down here, we're actually starting to already get little bud break with the leaves are starting to come out now. And I will still prune them now. Okay, I grow Scotia Adams, Bob Gordon. For those of you who don't know, those are all Canadensis varietals. I've noticed a tremendous difference in aroma as well as bee activity. Yes, me too. And then almost no bee activity in the afternoon. It makes me think that picking elderflowers need to be done only in the morning. Okay, this is great. This is the lore around elderflower is that you pick it during the warmth of the day. And that's when they're releasing the most pollen. That's when, if they're opening, that's like when they're opening. For me, the most important part that I've noticed, and it does have to do with pollen and it does have to do with aroma, is not doing it first thing in the morning when there's dew still on it. The day needs to warm up, and this is just anecdotal for me, but it sounds like you're experiencing something similar. It's really, they need to dry out and get in the warmth of the day, and they're going to be opening, new buds will be opening that day. But yeah, afternoon, perhaps they're not making the pollen is different, the aroma is different that they're putting out. So that is definitely possible. I would agree with that actually with you. We try to do it in the morning, but after the frost or dew has gone away, and not when it's cold or rainy. It's not good, especially if you're going to be drying them. So, okay, I love seeing all these people. Right, you guys are from all over. This is awesome. Oh, hi, Alice, all the way in the UK. Alice Jones is like, elderflower queen. If you have any questions about elderflower stuff, I'm going to put you in touch with her. I got you on the hook, Alice. And Heather of Hildemore, okay, you guys are doing lots of different trials with elderberries and elderflowers too. So there's lots of knowledge that's going to be shared. So that's why I'm very excited about return to in-person in June and future ones, because that's how we're going to be really collaborating to solve some of these problems that we have, because this is a new crop. Any experience with Terry's elderberry destemmer? You mentioned the Italian one. Yeah, the elderberry's Terry's elderberry destemmer. It's used by a lot of people. He fine-tuned that over like a decade. So it works really well. The berries that come off of it are so clean. Very little stem in there. I'm a big fan. I know that it is a lot slower than our in Italia destemmer. It's quite loud, but so are all destemers. So mostly I know that it's a difference in speed and price. So our destemmer that we got, was like an eighth of the price of Terry's. And yes, there's more stems. The berries might get a little bit more crushed, but that might be a trade-off that is worth it for your farm. I know that, greater than 5 acres of elderberries, if you're growing it in the orchard style, really you might need 2 of those destemmers going at the same time. That's definitely a possibility. So, it kind of comes down to your need for price versus, cleanliness, what you're okay with and what you're not, etc. So, hi Joy Mary-Lise. She was one of our grant recipients this year. I think some of our other grant recipients are on this year on the call as well. So this is exciting. When do you prune the Canadensis varietals? I'm in Indiana and we will have snow until spring. So like I said, up in British Columbia, they are doing it now. Really any time when they are dormant is great. You'll want to do it before it starts to thaw and they start to leaf out, because with the Canadensis, you really want it to be coming up from the ground, from the roots, rather than sprouting new growth from last year's canes. And one reason is that it seems to be that the, new flowers and berries on second year canes or third year canes, if you really haven't trimmed them in a while, they get smaller and smaller. The clusters get smaller and smaller, and they tend to, for berries, ripen unevenly. I don't know about the flowers, but I don't know. Yeah, actually, sometimes the middle of the flower is not open when the outside is ready. So, that's something to consider. So go for it. Go out there with your trimmer. We go into this in the other workshops more in depth, but if you have an orchard, if you're working on that scale more than an acre, you're not going to be with your hand trimmers trimming down to the ground. You're going to be using a bush hog mower. You're going to be using a modified weed whacker that has a blade on the bottom, something like that, to really help with that. So yeah, go for it. What are some good sources for cuttings or best practices to get started as we want to start an orchard this year? Okay, there are tons of possibilities. 5 years ago there were not, and now there are more elderberry growers that are able to make their own stems or their own cuttings to share. So I'm going to say that would be wherever you are located. There's probably one close to you. River Hills Harvest and Bueller Organics, elder farms that are the most well-known ones in the Midwest. Out here in California, we know some that are up in California and then in Oregon as well. So I'm not going to list them all now because it depends on your region. This is a perfect question to ask in one of the Facebook groups, or send me an email if you want to. Because there are loads of small producers now, small farms, and it's a really great way for them to have more income from their elderberry. They planted a small bit and they're using their own cuttings to expand, but then they can be able to share them as well. So reach out to me or ask in the Facebook groups, and we'll be able to put you in touch. Shipping containers for drying shed. Yeah, I have seen some great pictures of that, Ben. Are there any regulations or good manufacturing processes for materials for shed, wood, or steel? Anything that they touch must be food grade. So if you're putting it on mesh, you're going to want to make sure that is food grade stainless steel or the row cover crop. But I don't think it makes sense to put it on top of plywood, that has all this glue in it. Even if that's not part of a regulation, there's regulation, and then there's good manufacturing processes for that. I recommend you dive down into those posts on DIY drying sheds, and then see if you still have questions about that, because yes, you want to make sure that whatever they're touching needs to be treated as food and treated accordingly. But that's a topic for a different session. We got to have one on food safety. Okay, how will your grant activity connecting growers just involve California or extend to Oregon? So, we had our growers that got the grants last year were from all over the US. We had Oregon, California, all the way out to the East Coast, Midwest. So, obviously I'm West Coast focused, but it really depends on what we're looking for those grants is, do you have a clear plan? What stage are you in? Are you still in the, oh, we'd like to do this someday? Or do you have this lined up? Like, we know exactly what we would do with that money because we are ready to plant, or we need it for irrigation. This field has been planted, but we don't have the money for the irrigation, those kinds of things. So we want to make sure that it is somebody who's in the right stage of growth, rather than your location. I love seeing people connecting with other people in their area. So, and then this is a really important to me to help grow, in the same area, connecting. So reach out to each other through this way or in the Facebook group, post where you are, and so that everybody can help each other out. So I guess we've come to the end. I went over a little bit long, but I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this answered some of your basic questions. Of course, there's never enough time to go in as much depth now, but that's where those Facebook groups come in, or reaching out to me directly. And if I don't know the answer, because I definitely don't know all the answers, I hopefully know somebody who does, and I will put you in direct contact with them. So don't forget, if you want to learn the basics of organic certification, and specifically out west, getting your hedgerows certified organic as well, make sure you tune in on the 16th to our next workshop. One last question about handouts. I didn't do handouts for this one, but the handouts for the other ones that are super in-depth, email me, Katie@carmelberry.com. I'll send you those workshops and the handouts together. Okay, I love seeing all of you guys in here. Thanks so much, and go enjoy the rest of your day.